Welcome back to Real Estate Mindset. Today's video is going to be on the solution on how to get rid of property taxes permanently. Property taxes that are absolutely bankrupting Americans. I'm super excited to announce that Mitch Vexler is working on a bill that's going to go to the Texas House of Representatives, and I'm going to present you Mitch Vexler's bill on how to end property taxes. Now, the reason that I'm going to present it is I have no legal experience, no political experience, and if I can present this to you guys as the viewers, then what you guys can do as the viewers is you can copy and paste, so to speak, what we're doing here, and you can try to get this into the hands of your own local and state politicians so that we can start taking action to finally get rid of property taxes. So this is a very important video, and this bill is an accumulation of highly effective mathematical information that is going to prove beyond a shadow of doubt, not only is property taxes bankrupting Americans, it's also 100% fraud. Now, before I continue, Mitch Vexler, congratulations, first of all. And before I dig into this 18 pages, and I've got that down from, I think, 30 pages, can you tell the viewers how this all came to fruition and what's going on behind the scenes with the battle to end property taxes, at least here in Texas?
Well, there's an interesting saying, which is the cream rises to the top. And in reality, there's been a lot of people behind the scenes that once we dug into it and we started explaining to people what was happening, that surfaced. So my accountant has been extremely instrumental in double checking, triple checking, and quadruple checking the math that I had come up with. And as everybody knows, on my website is a mountain of evidence. So certain people had reached out and said, okay, we have this bill that we're looking at doing, and would you comment on that? I'm fast forwarding, so not to bore everybody. And I looked at the bill, read it several times, came to the conclusion it doesn't help the problem. The problem is that fraud has been created, and anything but for eliminating that fraud is at some point in time going to fail on its own. So the bill that I wrote eliminates the fraud. It cuts the taxing entities that are committing the fraud down to zero with regard to their ability to produce bonds. They have to operate on a cash basis. So once you get to that point and you understand what's going on, then I wrote the amicus brief to buttress the bill itself. And in combination, those two things lay the groundwork such that the fraud at the real estate taxing level is eliminated. Who owns the real estate taxing level, which is the CAD, Central Appraisal Districts? Well, that's the taxing entities. Who are the taxing entities? One of them is the school districts. So what has happened in reality is that we've calculated and quantified how much the uniform state sales tax would have to be to help walk down these debts over a period of time. And we eliminated the ability for any taxing entity to ever go out again and raise money without the input and approval of the state comptroller themselves. So the combination of this puts the locks on the door so that no fraud can ever be committed again, and thereby eliminating the real estate taxes. So that's what we're talking about here today.
Yes, Mitch, that is what we're talking about here today. And before we really dig in, I want to go over this briefly because this is absolutely amazing what the viewers are seeing on their screen. This came out a couple days ago. Now, sometimes people think it's going to be an impossible battle to win to eliminate property taxes. Some people are like, it's never going to happen, that we're wasting our time, and it's extremely unrealistic. But what you guys are seeing on your screen is exactly what we're talking about. This is regarding Texas. Texas Comptroller reveals a $23.76 billion, and that's a surplus with an S, that could be returned to Texas taxpayers. Now, the predominant amount of that surplus, guys, that close to $24 billion surplus, was from sales tax. So even with the sales tax unchanged here in Texas, we already have a $24 billion surplus. So we might as well get the politicians and the government off of our land so that we can finally own something. Again, you guys, the math doesn't lie. You just saw a surplus if we keep the tax rate unchanged. And if we were to fire all of the politicians and all of the workers at the CADs and comptroller and all of that, Mitch has already showed you that's going to save additional billions and billions of dollars. So this whole thing that Mitch and I are talking about is well within reach, but there's a huge but here. We can't do that without you. So if you support this bill, do us a favor, email Mitch, let him know that you support this bill, and then take this evidence, which will be in the description of this video, and get this packet, get this brief to as many people as you know as possible. And you guys, we're going to teach more on this as we make our way through 2025. But what we need you guys to do right now is take everything we're saying seriously and use the links in this video, take the documents, and get it to all the people you know.
All the previous attempts did not understand the fraud. They didn't understand how the fraud was committed, and they never tied the math to the evidence to the law. All three of those, here and now, effective immediately, that is the trifecta. We can and have done all three. And that is why everybody else in the past has failed. That is why this is the first shot for real to eliminate this problem.
And Mitch, do me a favor, just interrupt me whenever you want to interject something, but I'm going to do the best I can to show you and the viewers that over the last 6 months that I've been learning from you and that I can present this myself. And technically, I mean, if I could do it, anyone could do it. Again, I had a foreclosure, bankruptcy, and repo and dug myself out of the gutter. So if I could do it, so can the viewers. In the Texas House of Representatives Ways and Means Committee, pretty impressive, Mitch Vexler. Video presentation by Mitch Vexler and Travis Spencer. Thank you for the shout out, sir. Bill to repeal real estate tax in favor of a uniform states sales tax. Again, I just showed you guys surplus, $24 billion. The proof is in the pudding and in the math. We're going to start with 3 quotes from great leaders of the past, issuing us essentially a dire warning for today. I sincerely believe that the principle of spending money to be paid by prosperity under the name of funding is but swindling futurity on a large scale. And that's from Thomas Jefferson. Those who have the privilege to know have the duty to help. That's an important one. That's from Einstein. They who can give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. And that's from Benjamin Franklin, pretty harsh. All one must do is look at the disaster in California. Graft, corruption, incompetence, negligence, gross negligence, political posturing all lead to no water in the fire lines. Think about that, guys. No emergency escape routes to move large volumes of traffic, no desalination plants, 180,000 people displaced, fire equipment sent to foreign lands, brush not being cleared, taxes paid with zero return, and now negative return that will be in the trillions of dollars in losses, massive unemployment, and major destruction of an economic engine. This committee has the irrefutable obligation not to let Texas go the way of California. Now, roughly 9% or $7,000 of median income goes to only paying real estate taxes on houses. The average household is short roughly $9,000 per year, of which $7,000 is real estate taxes. The difference of surviving or bankruptcy is the real estate taxes. In January of 2025, Texas Comptroller Glenn Hagar announced a $23.76 billion surplus due in large because of sales tax, which means all we really need to do is just adjust things some. And then as Americans, we can get our property back. The only solution is to restore the balance sheet to the property owners, which would allow them to own the land under their real estate assets and stop the cumulative compounding of the fraud by the repeal of real estate taxes in favor of the uniform state sales tax. And now here's the key, guys. Texas must be the leader across the nation in economic stability, or it will fall prey to its own negligence. And we see that happening already. Those who vote against the repeal of real estate tax in favor of a uniform state sales tax are voting against their own family, friends, neighbors, constituents by placing 30% plus of the households into a high probability of bankruptcy. The only line item that truly matters is the median household income, from which to determine a closed derivative of valuation. The only verifiable proof of valuation is a sale between a willing buyer and willing seller on a closed cash basis. This evidence proves the weaponization of the real estate tax system against the property owners. Title 42 U.S. Code Section 1986, knowledge of wrongful act and power to prevent. Repeal the real estate tax in favor of the uniform state sales tax. One more bullet point again, we have a $24 billion surplus in sales tax. You guys, we already know this can work. Now, the next sheet right here, guys, is the bankruptcy probability worksheet. And if you guys want to come back, please do it. I'm going to skip the math, but if you want to review the math, just know it's here. So you can review it. But bottom line here, the bankruptcy probability worksheet is determining that 37.81% of owners have a high probability of bankruptcy. The home affordability / bankruptcy probability worksheet is the result of using market value, which is a taxation of unrealized gains. You can't do that, guys, and which is a violation of the 16th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Market value is the mechanism in Texas for which the assessed value is created. Under current Texas law, you can protest your market value, but not your assessed value. As the market value is fraudulent, then so is also the assessed value. Now, 72% of homeowners cannot afford the average market value of what DCAD claims is a $514,000 home, which again is proof of fraud. 37% of households, again, are on track of losing their homes. The same mathematical formulas apply across the state of Texas. And a predominant reason that is as well is because multiple counties use the same fraudulent software that allows these counties to back in a budget into a value. Now, what you guys are looking at here is additional math that's showing you that the fraud and overvaluation is happening in multiple counties. So one property is in Louisville ISD, on the right is Aubrey ISD, and this analysis shows two different single-family residences in two different municipalities, and then looks at the change in appraisal, notice market value, final market value, and assessed value for the years of 2016 through 2023, and then looks at inflation as stated by the U.S. Treasury during those years. Regardless of which value percentage compared, being either the notice value, final market value, or assessed value, DCAD through its corrupt database and co-conspirators increased the values 156% to 327% faster than the inflation, which again is another sign of fraud. And I put this in bold one more time. The same mathematical formulas apply across the state of Texas, and many counties use the same fraudulent value softwares to back budgets into values. Under USPAP and the Texas Property Tax Code, clear and convincing evidence exists for a single-family home. The law does not say, let's just make the values up to satisfy a predetermined budget created by a taxing entity. Now, this is a snippet of the corruption of the database and those people deploying made-up market value against the real estate taxpayers. It also proves that DCAD, JCAD, and HCAD, etc., are incapable by intent of obtaining the initial notice of market value, which is a violation of USPAP, Texas Property Tax Code, and the Texas Constitution. School districts are roughly 83% responsible for outstanding bond debt at the local taxing entity. And that's why you guys are starting to see mass teacher layoffs and property owners going bankrupt. The Texas Constitution requires taxable property be taxed in an equal and uniform manner. DCAD, HCAD, and JCAD, etc., did not fulfill the mandatory obligation, and this is what you guys may want to quote when you go into protest the value. But the section is just 23.01b. to base its appraisal upon individual characteristics that affect market value and consider all available evidence specific to value of property in determining market value. Section 23.01b also requires same or similar appraisal methods and techniques for some or similar properties, with records full of disparate valuations that could not have used similar methods and techniques. It's straight fraud, you guys. I mean, the variance is insane. DCAT has produced erroneous violations due to software issues, limitations, and manipulations. Valuations that are greater than market value cannot be equal and uniform. The Texas Constitution requires taxable property be taxed in an equal and uniform manner. Again, roughly 9% or $7,000 of median income goes to real estate taxes on homes. The average household is short roughly $9,000 per year, of which $7,000 of that is real estate taxes. So the difference of surviving or bankruptcy is the real estate taxes. Now, this is a great chart that Mitch has gone over. Again, if you guys want to go on the math, take your time and go over this. But when all is said and done, when we count unfunded liabilities and national debt, the average taxpayer from a federal standpoint, okay, is in debt, federal debt, by 1.13 million. But when we add the county, which again in Denton is about 243,000 per taxpayer, the combined total is $1.37 million in debt per taxpayer. But when we go to the bottom here, and this is what I really want you guys to understand, everyone that's watching this, okay, that doesn't think real estate taxes is a big deal, the minimum, guys, because remember, we pay property taxes on everything, but the minimum real estate tax as a percentage of median income is 8.68%. That is a massive chunk taken out of our paychecks in addition to what's already being taken out. We should be enraged at this information. Now, this first chart is the decreasing purchasing power of the dollar. So not only is there fraud being committed against us, remember all of the money printing, here's the M1 right here, this is rising inflation. All of this is making it much harder for us to live. It's like a double whammy. When we look at this last chart here, home prices being ungrounded from affordability. I mean, look at the gap. The gap from that red line to that black line, we have never had a time in history to where it was more difficult to be and sustain being a homeowner. Texas median household income by age, and basically this is saying, just to give you proof, that the median household income for the group of 45 to 65 is roughly $88,321. Incomes do not keep up pace with inflation, and that's the problem. If we all were making a lot more money, then maybe we can sustain this fraud. Incomes do not keep pace with tax on inflation. In addition to DCAD and the CADs, Texas and US fraudulently created market values. Its existence as an unlawful agency in violation of the 16th Amendment, not all inclusive, and within the market values are being used as a basis from which to create the assessed value. And charge a real estate tax is taxation on unrealized gains, which I didn't think was constitutional. Remember, millions of people, 143 million homeowners across the United States will be irreparably harmed if taxation on assessed value derived from the market value, which is an unrealized gain, is not stopped. So we must end this, and it must stop. For the above reason and evidence, this committee must recognize that no government agency or taxing entity or taxing assessor collector has in the history of the United States ever determined what market value is as of any date, because there must be a confirmed closing to truly determine market value. In the case of DCAD and other Texas CADs, if given the opportunity to determine market value, these entities abuse their authority as granted by executive branch of the state of Texas, which causes a waterfall effect of incorrect valuations throughout its databases and further throughout the underpinning of the economy, including lenders, bond investors, mortgage holders, and property owners. The most basic element of USPAP is to determine market value, which DCAD and other Texas CADs, along with their co-conspirators, choose to ignore in favor of fraudulent income statements. Comparisons, which are not comparisons, overriding by hand the values that DCAD and the CADs do not like to meet a predetermined budget created at the taxing entities, all of which have nothing to do with USPAP, Texas Property Tax Code, Texas Constitution, or the Constitution of the United States, or math required under those laws. This is really good too, Mitch. I got to give you a lot of credit for putting this together. Now, the first breakdown is going to go over essentially the 42% of home overvaluation. So through math and calculating fraud, Mitch has determined that homes are overvalued by approximately 42%. And you guys can go through this as well. Now, as far as how fast did home values go up, it went up 3 times faster versus inflation. And again, you guys, if you want to go over the summary of above, you can do that. Here's a few bullet points right here. Number A, there is no clear and convincing evidence to justify 20% increases year over year, yet alone 420% increases. Thus, an irrefutable violation of every appraisal method, requirement, and law ever written. In other words, they're abusing us, and only you can stop that. Based on the 140 property sample, what clear and convincing evidence exists to increase commercial property values in bulk by 80% year over year when the cash flows are generally flat? And that answer is none, meaning that the initial notice of values is determined by hand outside the confines of USPAP, they're breaking the law again, and the Texas Property Tax Code and Texas Constitution. C, what was the purpose to go from 6 class codes to 28 class codes when there is no audits or data entry? DCAD thinks, let's just make it up. Nobody will figure it out. We are DCAD, and the public has to trust us, but we shouldn't. The best descriptive words to describe this creation of categories is a scam, sham, and con. And it gets worse in that even after the creation of these categories, DCAD simply increases the values to meet the predetermined budgets of the taxing entities, all of which ends in a violation of the Texas Constitution. Please, guys, we need your help. We need you to take this, and we need you guys to use this. These class codes do not exist in many other central appraisal districts, and there is no uniformity of application. The level of ignorance of the central appraisal districts and lack of care of understanding for the very people and corporations that generate the revenue to begin with. Over 100,000 homeowners today have severely impacted by what DCAD and its co-conspirators have done, which is irrefutably illegal, heinous, and criminal. It cannot be stressed enough that the economic damage that will occur across the state of Texas to homeowners, commercial property owners, and businesses if this real estate tax is not repealed in favor of a uniform state sales tax. We have the math that ties to the laws to show how bad this will be, and it shows that the risk greatly outweighs the reward of owning real estate and will cause a dramatic domino effect of bankruptcies, not just of homeowners and income property owners, but to the mortgage holders, bond investors, which are pensions, guys, and 401ks. Not repealing the real estate tax will have the effect of destroying the very fabric of everyday American life, in that owning a home will be an impossibility for many people who strive to be owners and destroy any reason to own commercial property. So if you guys want to stop that from happening, you have to do something. You have to learn what we're talking about, and you have to use this to fight the powers that be. You guys have to do it. You have to. There are several different counties, Denton, Brazoria, Travis, and Torrent County, that are overvaluing houses by outrageous amounts. If I just go over this real quick, one county is doing overvaluations from a mathematical standpoint, looking at median income, okay, protecting Americans by 63%, and then 38%, and then triple digit 104%. Imagine living at a county where your appraisal district has overvalued houses by 104%. Affordability testing across Texas. In the middle of the chart, look at the median household income shortfall. That alone is fraught. And to the politicians, if any of them are listening to this, we need your help. It is your opportunity to make a positive difference and forever change in this world. To enhance your legacy, do it, and do it now. DCAD creates fraudulent income statements, uses comparisons in violation of USPAP, manipulates on record. This is crazy that this exists. Manipulates, we have this evidence. We have all the evidence of all of this. Manipulates 60,000 properties, builds it into their valuations, the predetermined budgets of the taxing entities, negotiates values before protest hearings because they can't get to all of the protests, issues a directive to the ARB panels, which are designed to help us, but they shaft us, and they are told not to go below a certain homestead cap. all of which is a violation of USPAP. It's straight fraud. Texas Constitution and the Constitution of the United States of America, and all of which create dirty data and corrupt databases. Our evidence proves that DCAD and his co-conspirators are not doing appraisals under any definition of law, and they are violating USPAP, and due to intentionally corrupt databases, are incapable of arriving at a legitimate market value. The same mathematical formulas apply across the state of Texas and apply across the United States of America. So I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly because I don't want to bore you. And for the people that really want to dig into this, again, linked in the description. A few bullet points here, though. No enforcement mechanism. All right, so apparently there's no enforcement mechanism in play, and if you don't like it, file suit with your local county clerk, okay? There cannot be this many violations of documents, requirements, organizations, USPAP, math, the Texas Constitution, and the Constitution of the United States, but for intent. So obviously the intent to deceive us is there. Now, also, I want to remind the viewers and any of the politicians that we have a wealth at Mitch's website, mockingbird.com, a wealth of information, and you need to listen to some of the audio. So I'm going to read some of the audio, and then I'm going to read some of the sentences in bold. Deputy Chief discusses a visit to Vexler CAD and the CAD's sharing workarounds in the CAMA software program. So we have evidence of them commingling loopholes and committing fraud together. Another one discusses correcting value info outside of the software. This is my favorite one. Chief Appraiser Don Spencer justifies and discusses correcting 60,000 property records. This is on recording. This is from a state official, okay? 60,000 property record values outside of the software by exporting them, changing them, and reloading the data. Tax Assessor Collector Michelle French comments on the enormity of the task being done in Excel and the potential for error. His own colleague is warning him of the danger of that. Spencer discusses raising market values for properties of 3 ISDs that in 2021 and 2022 had fallen below the comptroller's confidence interval. That's straight fraud. Software workarounds and data manipulation. The software violates the law. There's a lot of workarounds that have to happen with our current software program. Can you guys believe that he said that? Absolutely shocking. Running the process outside of the software, even as unfortunate as is, because what she's having to do is pull data out of the system, manipulate the data, and then put it back into the system. This is proof positive. How are these people not locked up? This same criminal behavior has replicated itself across Texas because the CADs copy from each other, and the above evidence should allow us to define the pattern so we can identify the practice. And it goes on here, and this is another thing, guys, that I put here. Dodd-Frank, Fannie, Freddie, the CFPB, and AUS, which is automated underwriting, failed to protect consumers. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I presented about 75% of that so that my voice box doesn't blow up. Mitch is going to read the final amount of this bill, which is another 5 pages.
The 16th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America. In the years 2016, 17, 18, 19, all the way through 2023, and prior to the creation of the Constitution of the United States of America, there were and are no laws in the United States that allow taxation of unrealized gains / market value. Can't do either one. The government overreach, as evidenced herein, is trying to create taxation of unrealized gains without understanding the ramifications of such action, which brings us to where we are, the tipping point. The state of Texas legislators, which created the taxing entities, which own the central appraisal districts, and the state comptroller, which allegedly oversees Denton Central Appraisal Districts and the Central Appraisal Districts, and the executive branch at that time did a workaround the U.S. Constitution and have violated the 16th Amendment, which states Congress to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived. That is why it says taxes on incomes. Then, as now, income was understood to refer to gains realized by a taxpayer through payment, exchange, or the like, not merely increases in value of property. Appreciation in the value of a home or other asset is not income until it is sold and the gain realized, and no property should be taxed on the sale or based on market value. We would be remiss if we did not point out that the appreciation in value, which is called inflation, is directly correlated to the decrease in purchasing power of the US dollar, which neither Denton Central Appraisal District or its co-conspirators take into consideration, which ends up being the equity stripping of mom and pop. The rule of 72 shows that depending on the interest rate, the debt will double every 5 to 7 years, and this assumes that the government spending stops on the day of the analysis. Many households today do not have the money to pay off the real estate tax. So what happens in 5 to 7 years from today, following roughly 30% of the households going in bankruptcy in between today and 5 and 7 years from now? In other words, the rule of 72 says that that debt's going to double. Mom and pop can't carry it today. Therefore, there is no possible way for them to be able to carry it in 5 to 7 years from now. It's over effective today. In Denton County, Texas alone, there are tens of billions of dollars at risk because of a minimum 30% overvaluation and overtaxation of property values, which directly impact bond values because they use 20-to-1 leverage, and mortgage values, which is the amortization level, and touches the lives in reality of every single real estate taxpayer. Our spreadsheets show that roughly $60 billion worth of bond and mortgage investment may not be returned as a direct result of the fraudulent overvaluation and overtaxation by DCAD and its co-conspirators. As seen in the graphics above, 70% of the households in Denton County cannot afford the average market value of a home that Denton County has claimed, which is the $514,000. How many homeowners have to decide whether to sell a car or not buy medicine in order to keep the roof over their head? You have seen in our numbers that 37.81% of the households in Denton County are at risk of losing their home as the debt to income ratios do not work. Extrapolating across multiple districts in Texas and the United States that utilize and violate market value under USPAP and their central appraisal districts, then it is easy to understand the 30% of the homeowners across all the counties, which is 3,143 counties roughly, are facing bankruptcy. There is no more money to pay for the ever-increasing predetermined budgets of the taxing entities. What we have seen through all this evidence is, in fact, the reason why many of these school districts should be placed into involuntary bankruptcy. And shortly, we'll get into the fix, the solution. The term cumulative compounding is another term that I came up with to help describe the equity stripping of mom and pop. And it is the opposite of an amortization schedule, which pays off over time. If the debts of the government, local and federal, are rolled out and interest rates rolled up, that is the cumulative compound effect, which in fact is fraud by omission created at both levels of government. The intent to defraud is laid bare when no school district that we have seen yet to date has produced a single bond schedule, balance sheet with proper notes, and the sources and uses. In addition to the fraud created by the local taxing entities and the central appraisal districts, the Federal Reserve created another layer of fraud known as inflation, both of which impact the ability of property owners to pay the real estate tax and survive. In other words, the Fed and the CADs are both purveyors of fraud on a mass scale, and the central appraisal districts tax both frauds. As an important note, which one of the banks who sold the school bonds to the pensions or the 401ks and mom and pop did the due diligence on the source of the revenue paid to the taxing entities? It's a very important question, because if they didn't do the due diligence and they sold the bonds, then how are they not liable for the actions to those pensions and the 401ks? The suit filed by myself against Denton Central Appraisal District and the individuals unwinds the intentional layering of complexity, which subterfuge is designed by highly compromised individuals and entities to defraud real estate taxpayers in violation of the Texas Constitution and a multitude of other state and federal laws. An interesting statement was given by Mr. Paxton to the Supreme Court of the United States in December of 2023. It stated, "A reviewing court shall hold unlawful and set aside agency actions, findings, and conclusions found to be arbitrary, capricious, and abuse of discretion, or otherwise not in accordance with law." Chapter 5 USC 706-2A. DCAD and the CADs are unlawful agencies that must be enjoined. By the way, that's federal law. The only denominator that matters is the median household income. All this other nonsense is not relevant because it is the median household income that is the number from which all the valuations should be determined. If mom and pop can't pay for it, then you can't have a $514,000 average median value of a home. We are at the tipping point. This is not sustainable. There is no alternative but to repeal the real estate tax in favor of a uniform states sales tax. Where will the money come from to cover the U.S. national debt plus the unfunded liabilities, roughly $1.1 million, plus the local debt, roughly $240,000, which amounts to roughly $1,380,000 per household, and an amortized cost of roughly $9,000 per month at 6.25%, amortized over 25 years. The state of Texas, by lack of enforcement, chose to intertwine the success of its citizens with the debt allowed to be created by the Federal Reserve, who did not contain the excessive spending. Asset values rise and fall, but the debt obligations are fixed. It is the debt obligations created by the central appraisal districts through the taxing entities which own the schools that are a massive problem. That contributes to the fraud. When Lehman Brothers collapsed, the debt to the gross domestic product was 40% in 2008. Just so you understand how bad this is, today it is roughly 120%. That is a 300% increase from today versus 2008. The U.S. fiscal ability to deal with the financial crisis has declined to the point of the eventual loss in confidence of the U.S. dollar. To understand what this means, let's break it down to a family with a gross income of $100,000 and a debt load of $40,000. After all of their other expenses, they can likely service the debt with no issue because the leverage is capped. Now, here we are 20 years later, and let's say that their gross income is the same $100,000, but their debt load is $120,000. The probability of paying off this debt is near zero in the next 30 years, even with reasonable interest. The Fed is inflating away the net present value of its obligations, meaning they will pay it off with cheaper dollars from the devaluation of your purchasing power. We have already shown that the incomes do not keep up with inflation, which reduces the ability of the citizens to maintain a standard of living to the point where over 30% of the homeowners today cannot afford the roof over their head. Between 1970 and 1980, the purchasing power of the US dollar has declined 75%. If you believe that Social Security, military pensions, Medicare, Medicaid, teachers' pensions will be honored, then you must realize that the purchasing power of those dollars paid in the future will decrease, meaning the current dollar buys less goods, yet the obligation on paper is being bought down with cheaper dollars via inflation. The purchasing power of those dollars you receive in the next 10 years has a high probability of being reduced by 75%. Let's say in 10 years, you may receive $4,000 in Social Security, which sounds okay until you realize that the purchasing power of that payment, the purchasing power of that $4,000 is likely to be just $1,000, which by then may be the equivalent of just 2 grocery carts of groceries. The Fed changed the definition of CPI now to exclude food, which is groceries, fuel, health insurance, tax, and the increased cost of goods and services, which are arbitrarily assigned a value. Has your cost of living only increased by 2.6% over the last 5 years, as stated by the Fed? Has your cost of health insurance only gone up 2.6% per year? Have your groceries only gone up 2.6% per year? How about your rent? The purchasing power of the US dollar has declined by at least 7.5% compounded year over year over the last 5 years. If you're planning for retirement and your thought process based on the adequate life you have today, and you project forward in 10 years using realistic inflation assumptions, your income may not be sufficient to maintain your retirement living standards. We are at the tipping point. The purchasing power of the cash you have in the bank is probably diminishing by 7.5% per year compounded. If you rely on the government for subsidies, you are in harm's way. Capping tax increases via the circuit breaker or the home exemptions or the appraisal review board panels are not dealing with the root cause of the issue and were only created out of ignorance to push the can down the road. And that has had a major cost to the property owners, which is cumulative compounding. The politicians can no longer bury their head in the sand and or create more counterproductive measures, and all must take an active role in eliminating the real estate taxes in favor of a uniform state's sales tax. Constitutional history and current evidence of Denton Central Appraisal District and Texas Central Appraisal Districts and their co-conspirators show that market value cannot and should not ever be the determination purview of any government agency. Market value is not a fact and is subjective in nature. A confirmed closed sale of property in question creates a factual and objective determination from which taxes, income, and capital gains can be determined. You must have a true sale. Willing buyer, willing seller, cash basis. The purpose of a lock on the door is to stop an honest man from temptation. The same can be said for rules and laws. They are, in fact, the locks on the door. Either the laws of USPAP, the Texas Constitution, the Constitution of the United States of America, Texas Property Tax Code, Texas Administrative Procedures Act, Administrative Procedures Act, Mass Appraisal Standards, IAAO, TAAO, Texas State Comptroller, and TDLR exist, or they don't. Unfortunately, the lack of enforcement has put this committee in the position of having to repeal the real estate tax in order to prohibit the bankruptcy of 30% plus of its households and its constituents in the state of Texas. When the state set up Chapter 313 agreements, it simply made the statement that the state's previous funding system was flawed from the beginning. The government's only answer is to pile on more laws and statutes and further complicate things and make it impossible to keep up with how money is being spent and wasted. In addition, there are multiple issues pertaining to the conflict between the state and federal laws and legislation. We spent a fair amount of time in this video to lay out the case for the House Ways and Means Committee to understand exactly what these ramifications are. We stayed away from the math intentionally so that you can go back and review it. And to those members of the House Ways and Means Committee, I'm available. You want me to go through this with you individually or in a group? I will review the math. I will break this down. I will do whatever is necessary to be done to help you understand why we are where we are. And I want to end this by simply saying, in reality, there is no choice but to repeal the current real estate taxes in favor of a uniform state's sales tax. You have 30% plus of your constituents literally right now today in harm's way of bankruptcy. The summation is that the only thing that separates your constituents from bankruptcy is $9,000. And of that $9,000, $7,000 is real estate tax. This is game over. The truth has to come out. We have the solution. The solution is in the bill that I wrote, and it fixes this once and for all. And it will still leave a surplus in the state budget.
Mitch has laid so much groundwork. Take it seriously what we're doing. There's a lot more there, you guys. But again, I cannot say this enough. We cannot do this without you. We have the math. We have the proof. Everything is there. We just need you. Other than that, Mitch, anything else you want to say before we go?
There's a lot here. The circumstances that we face are in reality dire, but the truth is they can be fixed. We have the solution. That bill lays it out exactly what needs to be done. It is within the hands of the House Ways and Means Committee to get it done. And there simply is no alternative. You can try and kick this can down the road, but the fraud is now laid bare. Kicking it down the road isn't going to work for the benefit of mom and pop. And I and Travis and the people behind me are all here for mom and pop. The only question on the table is, who are you here for?
Outstanding, sir. And one more time, you guys, please support us and what we're doing. Step 1, sign the petition. Step 2, learn some stuff. And again, if you support what we're saying, email us. Mitch's email is in the description. We'll use everything we can to end property tax in Texas. I'm super excited about 2025. And other than that, guys, if you're out there investing in real estate, you guys already know that we wish you luck and we hope you win.